Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are live with Season 1, Episode 7, and it is great to have you with us.
Yeah, it's really good to be back.
So I have to ask you, how is your brain feeling after last week?
Oh, man. It's still recovering, I think.
Right, because if you were with us for our last deep dive into the source materials, we spent a solid hour just staring into the abyss of brain-computer interfaces.
Yeah, the BCI stuff, Neuralink, the Stentrode, all of it.
Literally drilling into the skull to write data into the biological system.
It was heavy. We were so focused on the input jack of the human mind, like how do we upload information into the wetware?
Exactly. We were treating the brain like a hard drive that we were actively trying to write files onto. But today we are flipping that entire circuit board over.
We are indeed.
We aren't talking about writing data to the brain anymore. We're talking about reading the data that the universe has already written onto your body.
It's the perfect pivot, honestly, because last week was really about the future, right? Like what we might eventually do to the body. But this week is about the past, what the environment has already done to the body.
And I don't just mean fingerprints or scars or anything obvious like that. After reading through this research packet you brought, I'm looking myself in the mirror and I don't even see a person anymore.
What do you see?
I see a sensor platform.
Right. Yeah, that's the analogy that stuck with me, too. If you strip away a personality, the soul, the conscious biology, what you're left with is basically a data logger.
A highly sophisticated organic data logger.
Exactly. It records where you've been, the specific latitude of the tap water you drank 3 years ago, who your ancestors were 5 generations back.
And it stores all that information in very specific file directories.
Right.
Like you have data stored in the enamel of your teeth, you have completely different data in the keratin of your hair, and even different data in the marrow of your bones.
It is quite literally a distributed file system.
It's terrifying. Terrifying and fascinating in equal measure. So today we're doing a full system forensic deconstruction. But I do want to set some ground rules early on for you listening at home.
Yeah, good idea.
This is not a true crime show.
No, definitely not.
We aren't here for the whodunit drama or the gory details of some specific murder.
We are doing the systems engineering today. We're looking at the architecture of the forensic data itself. How does the signal get into your bones? How do we decode it? And what happens when the encryption breaks?
Our mission statement for this deep dive is to deconstruct what the papers call the forensic data architecture. And we've organized this massive stack of research into 3 main vectors.
Right. So vector 1 is the digital shift. We really have to look at the massive hardware upgrade in DNA tech, moving from the old FBI password system to this totally new social network system.
Which, by the way, completely killed the concept of anonymity.
It really did.
Well
Which leads us straight into vector 2, which is the math, specifically something called the 2% rule.
Oh, man, the 2% rule. This was the part of the reading where I actually just put my tablet down and stared at the wall for a solid minute.
It's intense. It is the exact mathematical tipping point where genetic privacy just evaporates.
Just poof, gone.
Right. And then finally, we have vector 3, the geological GPS.
This is the part where scientists can look at a single strand of your hair and tell you exactly which states you drove through on a road trip 3 months before you died.
Isotopic geochemistry. I know it sounds like literal magic, but it's actually just physics.
Okay, well, let's unpack this. Vector 1, the data bottleneck. I think most of us, and I am absolutely guilty of this, we operate under what you could call the Hollywood illusion of forensics.
You mean the magic box?
Yes, the magic box. You know the scene where the grumpy detective finds a single tiny drop of blood at the scene? He slides it into a machine that looks kind of like a fancy toaster oven.
The computer makes a bunch of beep-boop noises.
Right, and then boom. A high-res photo of the suspect pops up on a giant plasma screen with his current address, his social security number, and his favorite pizza topping.
That is the CSI effect in a nutshell. And look, it has done a massive disservice to the public understanding of what is actually mathematically possible.
Because it doesn't work like that.
Not even close. For the last 30 years, really since the mid-90s, forensic science has been operating on a very specific, very limited architecture called STRs.
STR, short tandem repeats.
Correct. Short tandem repeats. Now, to understand why this was such a bottleneck and why the recent changes are so radical, you have to look at the genetic code itself. An STR isn't a gene.
What do you mean?
It doesn't code for anything. It doesn't code for blue eyes or high cholesterol or male pattern baldness.
So it doesn't actually do anything biologically.
Mostly no. It's basically junk.
junk.
Yeah, it's a stutter in your DNA. It's a section where the biological molecular copier just got stuck. So it just repeats a pattern, say the letters GATA over and over again. Gata, gata, gata.
Oh, so it's a glitch.
It is a biological glitch, but it is a uniquely identifiable glitch. Or at least the number of times it glitches is unique. I might have 12 repeats at a specific spot on my genome. You might have 15. The guy next door might have 9.
Okay, so the FBI system,
Okay,
the one we hear about in literally every cop show, it's essentially just counting these stutters.
That is exactly what it is. They look at 20 specific locations, they call them loci on the genome, and they count the repeats at each spot. So your profile in the database just looks like a string of numbers, 12, 14, 9, 22, and so on.
Like a combination lock.
That is the best way to visualize it. It's a 20-digit passcode. And this design philosophy is incredibly important to understand because it was built from the ground up for an exact match.
Meaning the system is purely binary.
Precisely. If I find DNA at a crime scene, I generate that 20-number combination, I plug it into the CODIS server. If that exact combination is already sitting in the server, because let's say the guy was arrested for burglary back in 2002, then I get a hit. I know who he is.
But if he's never been arrested...
Then you get a user not found error. The screen just stays black.
Wow.
And this is the fatal flaw of the system. The STR architecture is just a lookup table. It tells you absolutely nothing about the human being behind the number.
Right, because it's junk code anyway.
Exactly. It doesn't tell you if they are black or white, tall or short.
Mm-hmm.
And crucially, and this is the part that kept cold cases cold for decades, it is mathematically blind to distant relationships.
Wait, why is that? I always thought DNA was all about finding family. If I have my brother's DNA, can I match it to him?
Oh, you can definitely match a brother or a parent. Immediate family members share 50% of their DNA, so their STR numbers will look statistically very similar. But once you step outside that immediate house, once you get to a first cousin or a second cousin,
The signal just fades.
the signal-to-noise ratio completely falls apart. You cannot mathematically distinguish a first cousin from a total stranger on the street using just those 20 markers. There simply isn't enough data density.
So it's like trying to recognize a face when you only have 20 pixels to work with.
That's a great way to put it.
So for 3 decades, we basically had this biological hard drive locked in an evidence locker. We had the file, the blood, or the hair, or whatever.
Yeah.
But unless the bad guy had already handed us the password by getting arrested previously,
Yeah.
we couldn't open it.
Precisely. We were stuck waiting for a hardware upgrade. And that upgrade finally arrived with the genomic revolution. Enter the SMP.
Ah, yes. Single nucleotide polymorphism.
Yes, SNPs. This is the underlying tech behind 23andMe, Ancestry, MyHeritage, all those direct-to-consumer kits that people buy for each other at Christmas.
And the difference in resolution between the old 20-pixel FBI method and this new consumer method is, well, I mean, it's not subtle at all, is it?
It is staggering. While the FBI system is looking at 20 markers, these commercial SNP arrays are looking at anywhere from 600,000 to 1 million markers.
From 20 to a million.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's not just an upgrade. That's an entirely different species of data.
It changes the topology of the search completely. We aren't looking for an exact match anymore. We are looking for patterns. Specifically, we are looking for something called identity by descent, or IBD.
Right, IBD.
Yeah.
This is the part of the reading where I actually had to stop and draw a diagram on a napkin to understand it. It relies on how DNA breaks apart over time, right?
It relies on the literal mechanics of meiosis. So imagine your DNA is a long, solid bar of colored clay. Let's say it's blue. And your partner's DNA is a bar of red clay. When you have a child, you don't just chop the bars in half.
You shuffle them.
Right. The chromosomes undergo recombination. They physically cross over. They touch each other and swap segments. So you pass down these long, contiguous chunks of that clay to your child.
Yeah.
A big blue block here, a big red block there.
Okay, so my son has these massive, solid blocks of my DNA.
Right. Now your son has a child. Those blocks get shuffled again. They break into smaller pieces. A grandfather's block might be 100 units long. By the time it gets to the grandson, that same block might be broken into 3 scattered pieces of 30 units.
So with every single generation, the blocks of shared DNA get smaller and more fragmented, like a crumbling brick wall.
Exactly. We literally call it the crumbling block visualization. But, and here's the absolute magic of the system, they crumble at a very predictable mathematical rate.
So you can measure the pieces.
Yes. By measuring the length of these shared blocks, which we measure in a unit called centimorgans, algorithms can calculate exactly how many generations back two people share a common ancestor.
Okay, I see. So with the old 20 marker system, you look at the code and you just see a total stranger. But with the 600,000 marker SMP system, you see the crumbling blocks.
Exactly.
You can see that person A and person B share this tiny, specific, jagged little block of code that proves they both descended from the exact same great-great-grandfather in 1890.
Correct. And this completely shatters the data bottleneck. Because you no longer need the suspect in the database, you just need the suspect's third cousin.
Yeah.
Or fourth cousin.
Because they'll share a block.
Right. The SMP architecture turns a simple lookup table into a massive network graph. It allows us to triangulate a target who has never provided a DNA sample in their entire life simply by analyzing the web of distant relatives surrounding them.
Which brings us perfectly to the math. Because when I first heard about this genetic genealogy stuff, I thought to myself, well, what are the odds? I haven't taken a DNA test. My parents haven't taken one. I'm paranoid about my privacy. I'm a ghost. I'm totally safe.
You're almost certainly not safe.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way from the packet.
In fact, statistically speaking, you're likely already uniquely identifiable. This is vector 2, the 2% rule.
Right. This comes from that landmark 2018 study in the journal Science by Yaniv Ehrlich and his team.
Yes. Identity inference of genomic data using long-range familial searches. It is basically the foundational text of this entire field of study. Ehrlich wanted to model the network effect. He asked a very simple systems question. What percentage of a target population actually needs to be in a database before everyone in that population is identifiable?
And the answer wasn't 50%. It wasn't even 20%.
It was 2%.
2%. I mean, that sounds impossibly low. How can 2% of the people compromise the privacy of the other 98%?
Because of the geometry of ancestry. It's exponential growth.
Yeah.
Think about it. You have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents. By the time you go back to your great-great-grandparents, you have 16.
Right. That's the pyramid going up.
But look at the pyramid coming down. Look at the descendants.
Okay.
Think about your great-great-grandfather. He lived in the late 1800s. He might have had 4 kids. Let's say they all had 4 kids. By the time you get down to your generation today, the third and fourth cousins, that single ancestor from 1890 is responsible for hundreds, maybe nearly 1,000 living descendants.
So I have what, like 1,000 fourth cousins just walking around out there?
Easily. And that is the vulnerability. You don't interact with these people. You don't know their names. You wouldn't even recognize them if they were standing next to you at the grocery store.
But genetically.
Genetically, you are carrying the exact same crumbling block of DNA from that one ancestor.
So if just one of those 1,000 strangers decides to spit in a tube and upload their data to GED match because they want to know if they're part Viking.
The beacon is lit. We call them genetic informants.
Genetic informants. I love that term, but it's also incredibly dark.
Well, unlike a police informant who explicitly wears a wire to catch a mob boss, these people are informants completely by accident. A single person uploading their data effectively outs their entire extended family tree without any of those people consenting to it.
Hundreds of people compromised by one Christmas gift.
Exactly.
So let's already walk through the workflow of this. Let's say you have a cold case from 1985. You have DNA from the crime scene. You run the new SNP array on it. You upload it to GED match. What actually happens next?
You get a list of matches, but they aren't the suspect. You might get a user named, I don't know, Soccer Mom 1980, who shares 73 centimorgans with your crime scene sample.
And based on the algorithmic chart, 73 centimorgans usually means what?
It means they are likely a third cousin. This tells the forensic genealogist that the suspect and Soccer Mom 1980 share a set of great-great-grandparents. Based on the human recombination rate, that most recent common ancestor, the MRCA, likely lived in the mid to late 19th century.
So the biology basically stops there. The computer has done its job.
Yes. The biology just hands you the anchor point in the 1800s. Now the investigation shifts entirely to what we call paper forensics.
Right. This is the part that feels like actual old school detective work. Because now you have to build the family tree forward in time.
Exactly. You are digging through census records, obituaries, birth certificates, marriage licenses. You identify those great-great-grandparents. Then you find all of their children. Then you find all of their children's children. You build a massive sprawling tree containing hundreds of living descendants.
And one of those descendants on that tree is the killer.
Yes. And this is where you start pruning the tree. You use metadata. You know the killer left male DNA at the scene, so you can immediately discard all the female branches of the tree.
Makes sense.
You know, the crime happened in Sacramento in 1985, and witnesses said the suspect was likely between 20 and 30 years old. So you discard the branches of the family living in New York or London. You discard the people who were toddlers or elderly in 1985.
You just keep whittling it down.
Right. And eventually you are left with one single leaf on the tree.
One leaf node.
Just one. You have a name, and you found him without ever having his DNA in the system. You use the biological network of his distant relatives to completely triangulate his position.
It's incredible. It really is. But it's also truly the end of anonymity as we know it. But here's the crazy part. That's just the genetic side of the data. That only tells us who they are. The third vector you mentioned tells us where they have been.
Vector 3, the geological GPS.
That's where we get into isotopes. And honestly, this blew my mind even more than the genealogy stuff. The idea that my physical body is quietly recording my location history chemically.
It's the concept of the body as an environmental sponge. We rely on a fundamental axiom of geochemistry, which is you are what you eat. Or more specifically, for our purposes, you are what you drink.
Okay.
The chemical signature of the local environment you live in is sequestered. It's locked away into your physical tissues.
So let's talk about the hardware here. What are we actually measuring when we read this data?
We rely on two main elements, strontium and oxygen. Let's start with strontium. Strontium is the bedrock.
The literal rocks under our feet.
Yes. Strontium-87 is a radiogenic isotope. It is produced by the radioactive decay of rubidium-87, which happens incredibly slowly over billions of years.
Okay, so it's a geological clock.
Exactly. So very old rocks, like the massive granite shields up in Canada, have a very different strontium signature than very young rocks, like the volcanic basalt in Hawaii or the Pacific Northwest.
Okay, so the geology has a unique fingerprint based on how old the ground is. But how does that rock fingerprint get into my bones? I mean, I don't eat rocks.
Well, ideally not. But it happens through the natural process of weathering.
Yeah.
Rain breaks down the rock over time. That strontium and leaches into the topsoil. It gets into the groundwater. It gets absorbed by the plants. The cows eat the grass. You eat the steak, or you drink the tap water.
And my body just accepts this random metal.
This is actually the body's mistake. Chemically speaking, strontium looks almost identical to calcium. It has the same charge. It has a very similar atomic size.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, your body is constantly trying to build and maintain bone, which needs calcium. It sees this strontium floating by in the bloodstream and literally says, close enough, and just builds it right into your skeleton.
But my skeleton is literally built out of the local geology.
It is. And that signature is incredibly robust. It doesn't change much as it moves up the food chain. If we analyze the strontium ratio in your bones, we can tell with a high degree of accuracy if you lived on top of old granite or young limestone.
That is wild. And then there's oxygen, right?
Yes, oxygen is the water. Specifically, we look at the ratio of oxygen 18 to oxygen 16. This is driven entirely by the global water cycle, specifically something called Rayleigh distillation.
Which the source material explained is just a very fancy academic way of saying rain.
Basically, yes. It's about evaporation and condensation physics. Oxygen 18 is heavier. It has 2 extra neutrons. When water evaporates from the ocean, those heavy molecules don't want to lift off as easily.
They're sluggish.
Right. And when those storm clouds move inland, the heavy water rains out first.
So if I'm living right on the coast, my rain is heavy. But if I'm living up in the mountains or way inland, the rain that finally gets to me is much lighter.
Exactly. It's like shaking a box of mixed rocks. The big, heavy ones fall out first. There is a very predictable global gradient based on latitude and altitude. Drinking the tap water in Denver gives you a fundamentally different oxygen isotope signature than drinking the tap water in Miami.
And scientists have actually mapped all of this out.
Oh yeah, extensively. They are called isoscapes. They are massive GIS heat maps of the entire world. Forensic geologists can take the isotope data extracted from an unidentified body, overlay it onto these maps, and generate a probability surface.
Like a weather map.
Exactly like a weather map, but instead of showing where it's going to rain, it shows the statistical probability of where that person was living before they died.
And here is where the biological hard drive analogy gets really, really good. Different parts of the human body actually store this data differently. It's not just one big hard drive that you wipe and rewrite. It has different components.
Right. If we use the PC analogy, we have read-only memory, we have RAM, and we have a high-speed cache.
Let's start with the teeth, the ROM.
Tooth enamel is unique biologically. It forms when you are a child. Starting in utero, continuing through childhood, and finishing up to about age 16 for your wisdom teeth. Once the enamel mineralizes and hardens, it is dead tissue. It is completely sealed off.
So it never updates.
Never. It does not remodel ever. It is a locked, cryptographic record of your childhood environment. If I analyze your wisdom tooth today, even if you are 90 years old, it will tell me the precise isotopic signature of the tap water you drank when you were 12.
That is just wild to think about.
Yeah.
So I could move to a totally different continent, live there for 50 years, but my teeth are still quietly snitching on the town I grew up in.
Precisely. It is read-only memory. It is quite literally the factory settings of your life.
Incredible. And then you have the bones, the RAM.
Bones are living tissue. They are constantly remodeling themselves. You have these cells called osteoclasts that eat away the old bone and osteoblasts that build new bone in its place. But they do this at very different speeds depending on the bone. This is your RAM, your rolling buffer.
So the femur, the big heavy leg bone, is slow.
Very slow. The cortical bone in your femur turns over at a rate of maybe 3% per year. So if we analyze the femur, we aren't seeing a snapshot. We were seeing a blended average of the last 20 to 30 years of your life. It's the long-term storage drive.
And what about the ribs?
Ribs are trabecular bone. They are much spongier. They turn over way faster, maybe around 14% per year. So the ribs represent a rolling average of just the last 2 to 5 years of your life.
Oh, I see. So you compare them.
Exactly. By comparing the isotope signature in the femur to the signature in the rib, we can see if you moved recently. If the signatures perfectly match, you stayed, put your whole adult life. If they are drastically different, you migrated.
And finally, we have the hair, the high-speed cache.
This is probably the most granular data logger we have on the human body. Hair is just a continuous protein extrusion. It grows at a remarkably consistent rate, about 1.1 centimeters per month, or roughly 0.4 millimeters a day.
So it's essentially a physical timeline.
It is a biological film strip.
Yeah.
Forensic scientists can take a single long strand of hair, say a strand 26 centimeters long, and carefully cut it into 1 centimeter segments.
And each one of those tiny segments is exactly 1 month of data.
Exactly. Segment 1 is the month right before death. Segment 2 is the month before that. By analyzing the isotopes in each segment sequentially, we can literally reconstruct a road trip log.
Wow.
We can look at the data and say, okay, in June, the oxygen signature was consistent with New York. Then in July, there was a sharp spike in the data. The subject moved to Texas. Then in August, the strontium shifts, suggesting they drove up into the mountains.
You can literally track their physical movement month by month, leading right up to the crime.
Yes. There was actually a very famous case, a Jane Doe found in Utah. For years, they had absolutely no idea who she was or where she came from. They eventually analyzed her hair. They could clearly see she had been moving around the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Washington in the specific months before she died. They could pinpoint the exact weeks she was traveling based on the water she was drinking. It effectively creates a high-resolution travel diary for a person who can no longer speak.
It is amazing science.
Yeah.
It really is. But it also leads us directly into the darker side of this deep dive. Vector 4, the cybersecurity threat matrix. Because all of this data we've been talking about, this genetic networking, these biological logs, it completely changes our fundamental concept of privacy.
It fundamentally breaks the traditional model of consent.
Right. We usually think of privacy as an individual choice. I choose to post a photo on Instagram. I choose to share my GPS location with an app. But with DNA, my individual choice doesn't matter anymore.
We call it proxy surveillance. The issue is that genetic data is a shared asset. You share it with your parents, your siblings, your cousins. The very moment one single person in that network decides to take a fun ancestry test, they have permanently compromised the privacy key for the entire network.
And look, we aren't just talking about the police finding serial killers here. We are talking about bad actors exploiting this architecture.
This is the cybersecurity vulnerability that really isn't discussed enough in the public sphere. These databases, places like GED Match or Family Tree DNA, they are essentially open source intelligence, OSINT. In many cases, you can just upload raw text data files to them.
And that open door allows for some really scary hacks. The research packet mentioned something called IBS tiling.
IBS stands for Identity by State. It's how the computer algorithm recognizes matching DNA segments. The tiling attack is a mathematical way to reconstruct someone's entire genome without ever actually hacking the server itself.
How does that even work? Because reading this, it sounded like straight up sci-fi to me.
It's clever. Imagine I am a hacker, and I want to know your exact genetic code, but I obviously don't have your physical DNA. But I know you are somewhere in that database. I can upload a synthetic DNA profile, a completely fake user. The database will process it and tell me, hey, this fake user shares a tiny segment of DNA with your target.
Okay, so you found one tiny piece of my puzzle.
Right. Now I upload another fake user, and another, and another. If I upload about 900 of these specifically crafted reference profiles, I can find enough overlapping segments to mathematically tile them together.
Like stitching a quilt?
Exactly. I can reconstruct up to 82% of your entire genome just by looking at the match alerts you trigger. I never see your actual file.
So you can steal my genetic code just by pinging the database with bots.
Essentially, yes. And once I have your genome, I can start looking for medical traits.
This is what they call IBS baiting, right? Trait hunting.
Correct. Let's say I am an unscrupulous health insurance company, or maybe a foreign intelligence agency looking for leverage on a diplomat. I want to know if you have the BRCA mutation for brain cancer, or maybe the APOE4 variant for early onset Alzheimer's.
You upload a fake profile that only has that one Alzheimer's marker.
Exactly. I create a synthetic genome that is totally blank everywhere, except for that one specific Alzheimer's gene. If the database pings back and tells me match found you are related to the target, well, I know the target carries that exact gene. I have essentially diagnosed you remotely without your consent and without a warrant.
That is deeply dystopian.
Yeah.
And legally speaking, where do we even stand on this? Is there any protection against this kind of proxy surveillance?
Very little at the moment. We are currently operating in a massive legal gray zone. The courts right now rely on something called the third-party doctrine.
Which basically says if you freely give your data to a third-party company, you can't logically expect it to be private anymore.
Right. The courts currently view uploading your DNA to a commercial company as voluntarily abandoning your Fourth Amendment privacy rights.
But what about the relatives who didn't upload anything? The ones who were outed by the proxy?
The law simply hasn't caught up to the math yet. And there's a massive loophole for law enforcement, too, because the genetic genealogy search the police do isn't actually considered evidence.
Wait, what do you mean? How is finding the killer not evidence?
Legally, it is classified merely as an investigative lead. It's just a tip. The police use the massive database dragnet to find your name. Then they physically follow you, wait for you to throw away a coffee cup at a Starbucks, and they swab the cup. They arrest you based on the cup. That fresh STR DNA match is the actual evidence.
So the judge in the trial never even sees the massive genealogy search.
Exactly. The massive dragnet search that potentially violated the privacy of thousands of your relatives. That never really gets challenged in court because it wasn't the final evidence presented to the jury. It's a very convenient way to bypass the Fourth Amendment by laundering the search through a commercial genealogy website.
It effectively launders the probable cause.
That is a very harsh way to put it, but architecturally speaking, yes. It bypasses the need for individualized suspicion until the very, very end of the process.
Wow. So what does this all mean for us zooming out? We've gone from STRs to SNPs, from 20 markers to 1 million. We've gone from rocks in our teeth to literally roadmaps in our hair.
It means we have permanently transitioned from a world of localized secrets to a distributed network of biological data.
The end of anonymity.
I really think so. Between the genetic triangulation of our distant cousins and the isotopic logs written into our bones, true anonymity is just a relic of the pre-digital and pre-genomic age. We are all walking around with a broadcast beacon that constantly transmits our identity and our history.
It's a massive societal trade-off. On one hand, we gain the incredible, unprecedented power to solve 40-year-old cold cases, to bring actual closure to families who thought they would never, ever know the truth. That is an undeniable public good.
It is. But the cost of that good is the total and permanent loss of genetic privacy. We are now an open book, whether we want it to be published or not.
And it really makes you wonder, with all these reconstructed OSIN profiles, what happens when bad actors start synthesizing fake biological evidence based on your stolen code and just planning it?
That is the next frontier of the nightmare.
Something for you all to mull over next time you toss a coffee cup in a public trash can. Well, on that incredibly cheery note, we have spent the last hour talking about recognizing patterns in the biological code, recognizing the hidden patterns in DNA sequences and isotopes.
And next week, we are going to pivot again. We are going to look at the machines built to recognize patterns in human language.
That's right. Join us for Season 1, Episode 8, where we're going to dive deep into the architecture of large language models. We'll pop the hood on AI to see if it's actually thinking or if it's just playing a billion-dollar game of statistical Mad Libs.
I have a lot of very specific thoughts on that.
Oh, I bet you do. Thanks for listening to this deep dive, you guys. See you next time.